of Louisiana, they were known as the Washita. Okay, the Washita controlled all of this land for thousands of years, going back 6,000 years. They have historical records of controlling it for 6,000 years. And when the Europeans came over here, basically, they did make political bonds and agreements with the Washita. George Washington's actual family name is Wessington. Okay. I'm not sure when it was changed, but I suspect that it was changed to correspond to the Washita, because Washita, Washington, then linking the black royal lineage to Washington, D.C., District of Columbia, you know, is linking the Davidic bloodline. I don't know if you caught it, the Merovingian royal line. Okay, the story goes as per the Holy Blood, Holy Grail. Anybody here read that?
Yes, and there's a movie also out of that.
Yeah. And then the Da Vinci Code and everything, trying to tie in the Merovingians and say they're the true Davidic line, they have the blood of Jesus, and therefore they have the right to you know, be the monarchs and the royal lines of Europe. All, as they say, bullshit.
Yes, that's true.
You know, it's all fabricated constructionist history to justify their whole story.
I mean, basically the Gnostics, you know, kind of kept their life when they.
But it goes back to our friend Akhenaten and his wife Nefertiti. I don't know if you caught it, that second bust or facial that they showed was Nefertiti. And there are other samples of videos and stuff you can find on YouTube putting Michelle Obama side by that bust, and the likeness is extraordinary. They look like exactly the same. I don't know what her history is, but I'm sure there's some relationship. Because remember, I said that we're on time loops and time cycles. We just keep on being recycled. Whether Obama and Michelle were Akhenaten, Nefertiti is not really relevant because I don't ascribe importance to that. It's all an overlay and construct to justify this Illuminati, enlightened elite control system of these bloodlines. But as I said, their oldest daughter is Mary Taten. One of their progeny was who we know as King Tutankhamen. Tutankhamen. He went back to Amen after his father got chased out of town with Aten. And, but phonetically, a D is a soft T. D, T, you know, they're basically related. So you can have two D's here, and a U can be hardened by the V sound. U, V, double U. You know, what is W? It's really two V's, right? So here's where we get the phenome or the phonetic David, which sort of interestingly, numerically, we have 4, 22, 4, which is basically 11, 11, and 4 with the two squares that I did in the beginning. So the Davidic line goes back to the same template of the father, the mother, the prodigal son, King Tut, who died and was resurrected. You know, it's all the same overlay. But the Davidic line really started there as far as the construct of it, bringing it all the way through the next 1,300 years and constructing the story that there is a royal bloodline in the house of David and all the rest of it. Of course, Solomon is the moon and the sun, Sol and moon. Saul, who became Paul, is really another version of Sol, who became Pa, or the father, the son becoming the father. Okay? Cleopatra just simply means Cleopatra, the daughter of the father. Okay? Paris is the father of the Ari. You know, and then where you see all these stories, there's always the two males fighting for the female. The story of Paris and the other guy, whatever his name, and the, you know, Helen of Troy, and you know, many mythological and historical stories. There's an interesting, you know, historical timeline that Cleopatra, who was the 13th of what is known as the Ptolemaic dynasty, which was started when Alexander the Great conquered, you know, Egypt and the whole known world, basically. When he died, he divided his realm into three of his generals. One general is named Ptolemy, and he was given Egypt. So he started the Ptolemaic line. And the 13th, there were 12 males and 1 female. The 13th was Cleopatra. She had a daughter and twin sons. The one twin son was known as Alexander Helios, and whose symbol, by the way, was a cone and like that. Okay, why do I know this? Because 2 guys I knew about 14 years ago basically discovered the Ptolemaic line tomb here in southern Illinois. And that's a very long story. I'll tell it another time. But basically, this man discovered it in the mid to late 80s, and then these 2 guys named Harry and George that I met were like, you know, private investigators trying to unravel all this. But this guy, Russ Burroughs, actually found this cave in southern Illinois in an area that's commonly referred to as Little Egypt, where they find artifacts, Egyptian artifacts, all the time. And he found this cave, part artificial, part natural, and he brought out all of these artifacts, and he described finding all these sarcophagi and all kinds of things. You know, when I say all kinds of things, I mean extraordinary artifacts, gold, and you name it, including carved stones. And after Cleopatra and Mark Antony were defeated by Augustus Caesar, the 2 twins disappeared, never to be heard from again. Well, the conclusion that was drawn is that they took off. The daughter, by the way, married the king of this area over here in modern Libya and Algeria, but the 2 sons disappeared, and George and Harry investigated this tomb and all kinds of things, which would take me hours to explain. But if you go to a website called Ancient America, there's a magazine, and if you can find it, they may not still have it on there. They published quite a lot about all of this. But they found all the artifacts with this symbol, which basically was Alexander Helios's symbol, one of the 2 twin boys. So you have the twins throughout history, the 2 male twins. Atlas and Hercules were considered twins, the Pillars of Hercules, all kinds of things like that, going back to the 2 pillars. So going back to the Davidic line, King Tut, David, coming through pre-biblical period, and then post, after Christ, in around the 4th century, you have emerging here the Merovingian line, which in this book, Holy Blood, Holy Grail, goes into all this history and so forth, some of which is accurate, some of which is distorted and made to fit the theory. But that's what the Da Vinci Code is based on, qualifying the Merovingian line that moved up from southern France, eventually into Paris and taking over the Frankish kingdom, and through Charlemagne becoming the Holy Roman Empire. So Charlemagne became the first Holy Roman Emperor. I'm skipping ahead, I'm going to go back a little bit, but he became the first Holy Roman Emperor in the year 800, and established what was called the Carolingian dynasty or the Carolinian line, which was considered the royal bloodline that became the royal houses and the monarchies of Europe. That is who the Carolinas are named after. North and South Carolina is the Carolinian bloodline, the Merovingian bloodline. Of course, you see the correspondence between, Charlotte, North Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina. There's Charles and Charlotte, the male and the female kind of crossing over. And an interesting fact, quite by coincidence, I'm sure, is the point on the seaboard where the two states are separated is exactly on the 33rd parallel. Okay, if you draw a line from that point on the seaboard to Jerusalem, they're exactly on the same line. So my interpretation of that is basically the outward expression of the Carolinian line considered to be the royal bloodline of the Davidic line, manifesting the Christ and trying to justify their so-called royal lineage as, well, we're descended from Jesus Christ, so of course we should be considered royal lines. But in the principle of the splitting of the male and the polarization, they split it into north and south, and they polarized masculine and feminine. So there's always symbolic reasons why certain things are done and where they're placed exactly on the map. There are two words in Latin for dove. You have DVD, the word Dovid, which obviously has the DVD, is also is Latin. And so there you have the symbol of the white dove, which is also, along with the peace symbol, been brought up in the New Age of peace and the white dove, when in actual fact it's this Merovingian Davidic bloodline symbol that they've held for thousands of years. The other word for dove is columba, which is the root of the word Columbia. Okay, so you have Washita on district of Columba, the district of the dove or of the Davidic bloodline. You have British Columbia, you have Columbia in South America, you have District of Columbia. It's all about the symbol of the dove, the Davidic or Dovidic line, the justification of the royal houses saying that we have royal lineage, we have royal blood, we are of some sort of higher principle, and therefore we are justified in doing what we do. And going back to our friends, the Hyksos, the double K team. Let's erase those guys. Tired of How does that grab you?
Totally amazing. So we never hear about this in our high school history classes.
Yeah, imagine that.
So Simon and Garfunkel were right, all that crap we learned in high school. Just dumbing you down.
Here's an interesting little thing in reading this book.
Not in America.
The hieroglyphic symbol of the gods looks like this. Okay, and when they're grouped together, I'll read you this little passage. The priests of Anu, at a very early period, grouped together the 9 greatest gods, the ones I read you that list earlier on, forming what is called the Pa'ut Neteru, or company of the gods, or as it is written in the pyramid text, Pa'ud A'at, the great company of gods. Hence the Council of Nine. Does this remind you of anything?
Looks like music.
No, it could be that, but how about if I did this? Sperm.
Oh, flag.
Golf flags.
All in one. Same thing.
Organized in two sets of 9, the greater gods and the lesser gods.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
18 holes.
Yep. Golf. Gentlemen only, ladies forbidden.
Actually, etymological.
That is the origin of the name golf. Okay. So you have the gods in these Egyptian symbols with these little holes with these men in white sticks and knickers, forbidding women playing on these little sets. And don't get me wrong, I love to play golf, but nonetheless, bringing this symbology that we watch every week and this weekend as New Babylon is being birthed, as the revaluation of the dinar is being activated as we speak, you have the activation of the master plan of the control of Washington, D.C., along with London and Rome, of reinstituting New Babylon, building the largest so-called embassy in the world that's huge, and it actually will employ or does employ 16,000 people right now in Baghdad in the green zone. So, so you have the British Open going on this weekend, where golf was born. Do you think there's a coincidence when they time these things? No, believe me. They're all in their little dungeons and castles doing their little Luciferian Egyptian rituals, looking at the symbol of the gods, expecting Anu and Nibiru to show up here next year, but it's been canceled.
I'm so glad. So I can build my house now?
Yes.
Can you build your house? Sure, why not?
Okay. I feel better about that.
So, remember our friend Mary Taten,
Yes.
which of course we can write as Mary. When you gained a certain age as a woman within the elite system, you became a Mary. And then when you were of the age to become a birthing vessel, you entered your marriage. Okay.
Marriage. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so this is the root of the word marriage. Now, in keeping with our principle of the male, dominant, castrated male dominating and controlling the feminine principle, we have this thing called the Mary. We have this place called L'America, the spiritual body of the feminine. This is obviously the article, L'America. We were taught in high school or throughout school that the name America came from Amerigo Vespucci. Okay? I don't think so. Just like Christopher Columbus was not named Christopher Columbus, he was carrying the Columba, or the Davidic line, to L'America to implant through the doctrine of discovery and the overlay of the Vatican and the Holy See and the City of London, to overlay the feminine and ultimately establish the third city-state nation as part of the outpicturing of everything we've been talking about, to overlay the female spiritual body, to control life, basically. Because where does life come from? It comes from the magnetic field, the feminine, and all the rest of that. So that is what L'America, or America, really is about. Now, the interesting thing is, has so much of the emergence of a lot of this, what has been called spiritual renaissance or reawakening, where has it come from? It's come from La America, America. So many of the individuals who were birthed in the last 60 years since the end of World War II, obviously not discounting, obviously in Europe, there's lots of people who were into it, but really the start was here in America. And so we have this flowering of that seeming renaissance in the 1960s, the 1970s, but then through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, we have the progression of the Fourth Reich, of the, basically Nazi fascist regime descending upon America to encapsulate and sequester and border that vast majority of individuals impelled by that sense of purpose to reawaken the spirit, re-emerge with rebalancing the feminine and the masculine, all of that. Because what do we know from what we've read and seen and understood of the last 15 years and longer of what the template and the intention was here in this land? It was to build FEMA camps, concentration camps, and at a certain point, which was supposed to really have gone off 4 to 6 years ago, gather up any and all of the individuals who were in any way heretics, trying to break out of the matrix and open up spiritual awakening and intellectual awakening, legal and monetary awakening, all the rest of it, and put us in those camps and take care of us. Fortunately, it hasn't happened. At this point, I don't believe it is able to happen, and I believe the whole thing is fragmenting and splintering, which we'll go into more tomorrow. But we were attracted to that, to birth, incarnate here, or immigrate, from Europe and so forth, because we knew intrinsically there was something here that we're supposed to do. Okay, well, it was kind of like bait and the hook. That illusion of freedom and democracy bring us here and then turn it into the most repressive fascist regime on the history of this planet. Okay. So tomorrow we're going to get into all the detail of how the modern structure of the money legal system continues the pattern that was created in this whole historical foundation and context that I've been building, and how it leads into where we're at today, and of course how we have the capacity to turn it completely on its head, which we are doing, and it is going tilt, but not without a price. We'll talk about that tomorrow. So continuing with the Carolingian line of the Holy Roman Emperor, it came to a focal point 160 years after Charlemagne in the year 962 with a guy named Otto the Great. Or at least that's what his mother called him.
Yes.
Otto, you're so great.
Yeah.
Wait, that's the wrong one. An interesting looking name, don't you think? Yes. He consolidated the Holy Roman Empire in the year 962, and he made a deal with the Pope. Funny thing.
Another one, right?
Yeah. And basically the deal was my line, Otto's line, the Germanic, Aryan aristocracy, elite, monarchical, Merovingian bloodlines, we will take control of Europe, and from Europe the rest of the planet, and we will hold the line of the king. We will become the king, okay? Collectively speaking, to fulfill the original covenant. And you, Mr. Pope, and your succession, your apostolic succession, based on what? the descent of the king, the right of king, the divine right of kings that was established in Babylon and Sumer and Marduk and Hammurabi, and came down through the story of Melchizedek as the king priest, and then was consolidated in the story of John the Baptist and as the priest, who then was removed as the precursor, and the line of Jesus became the king priest, or the Davidic Merovingian bloodline, and was passed on to build the church on the rock of Peter, on the Capitoline Hill, known now as Vatican City, where the Capitol or the Capitoline would hold the head, and that would become the line of the priest. But the apostolic succession would be actually the king priest, because the Pope then had the authority given from God as the vicar of Christ, or the pontiff, the bridge back to the Anunnaki, and we've been told by, Sitchin mythology, some of it as mythology, that Anunnaki means the Nephilim, those who came down, all the rest of it. What it really means basically is heaven and earth and the bridge. Okay? The bridge between earth and heaven. Okay, what's the bridge? It's that arch, the two pillars, the king and the priest, the bridge between heaven and earth that we can never get to unless we ascend to a certain level of financial capacity in which we can pay off our karma and ascend to heaven and become one of the gods. This whole book is about, the Egyptian Book of the Dead is about becoming one with the gods, getting to qualify to hang out with the gods, to get your ba up to your ka, and paying enough to the on in between and the bank to qualify. So Otto said, okay, I've got it all. I'm the bloodline. I'm the Carolinian bloodline, Merovingian, and so forth. And my descendants will spread out and control the monarchical crowns of Europe. And how do they get the crown? They are coronated. What's a corona? It's the ring around the sun. Who gets to grant the coronation? The Pope. So if you're in amongst the circle, you get the crown on your head, but it is granted by he who has the apostolic succession built, the church built on the rock of Ptah, line of Peter. And so you get to become a new son. You get coronated. You wear the crown or the sun around your head. Okay? And so Otto said, I got it all here. I'm that Germanic line, the Aryan line. And so I'll take the line of the king, you take the line of the priest, you create the law that will bind the people, and we will meet at the end of time. Everything okay? Does she have to go? Okay. Okay, bye-bye. No problem. Well, we see the Caroline line is leaving us.
Yes.
And they made a pact, basically, that Germanic Aryan line would hold the line of the king, and then, of course, the Vatican See and the apostolic succession of the popes, the pontiff, the bridge between earth and sky, known as the vicar or the replacement of Christ, would hold the line of the priest, and they would meet at the end of time. We're in Jerusalem, and they would establish a literal throne upon which the refusion or the reintegration of the two split pillars, or the split of the male through the two pillars, would come back and meet at the end of time. Now, interestingly, in the early 90s, the state of Israel granted the Vatican a good portion of land in Jerusalem that they have been consolidating as sovereign land under the authority of the Vatican, and Otto, to commemorate the pact made in 962, built a castle. Well, an exact replica of that castle has been being built on that land granted from Israel to the Vatican in Jerusalem in the last 15 years. It's probably done by now. Okay. That's where they plan to reestablish the throne and bring the two pillars back together and bring the entire harvest of the world through the New World Order and the middle management team like the Bushes and everybody else and the Rothschilds. We're going to get into them tomorrow. We'll have some fun with those historical pieces. But here's the kicker. Did you ever look at your Social Security card? Did you notice that there's two pillars
Pillars in an arch.
and an arch? Look familiar?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I just thought these were frustrated decorators.
You know, so what they do is, here is the all capital letters name, John Doe. There's a signature line, and, well, actually the signature is down here. And there's a number with 9 digits, of course. The 9 gods, the Council of 9. So here's the artificial straw man. We're going to get into all that tomorrow in more detail and how that integrates with all of this. But it says here that you must apply your signature, your living signature, to basically bind yourself and attach yourself as bonded surety, the guarantor, to the perpetual debt system, which we're going to go into more tomorrow, between the two pillars and under the arch or the mantle of Yahweh or Anu, to put us between the two pillars, the line of the king and the priest, and control our creator life force capacity.
How do we get out of it?
Well, we'll talk about that tomorrow.
We stay in it.
Huh?
We stay in it and clean it up ourselves, right?
Well, yes and no.
Yes and no. All right.
No, we don't stay in that. That's an artificial construct that we've consented to, but without full disclosure, to say the least. So a big part of what we're doing here this weekend is part of the full disclosure. Okay, they're not doing it, but I took it upon myself, as I said, to put the puzzle pieces together and see how it all fit. And once it started coming into form, you know how you're building your puzzle when you do a jigsaw puzzle and there's a lot of holes and pieces, but then you start seeing the picture and it starts emerging. When it started coming into form and I started seeing all of this over the last 5 to 10 years, based on the previous 30 to 40 years of reading and researching, and I used to read stacks of books this big and all the rest of it, 99% of which you can just throw away. But it served me to go through to get to the point of being able to have the template, the picture of the jigsaw puzzle starting to emerge. And then you just start seeing the pieces all around, you know. And they all correspond, like seeing the logo of Citibank. I didn't even really see that until a few months ago. You know, I was just, you know, all of a sudden one day I looked at it and I go, there they are, the two pillars, the cross and the arch. You know, this I saw, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. It's always there. It's a standard operating procedure. Any questions so far?
I'm in the fireplace business, and that could be a mantle with 2 pilasters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
But
that's
yet
good.
you're consumed by fire in it too.
Mm-hmm.
Your baptism in fire. So, and the chimney, you know, I mean, things work dynamically, basically in reverse.
Well, you know, sometimes, as Freud said, a cigar is just a cigar. So don't necessarily take it too far. You know, and the bottom line is, when all is said and done, none of this really means anything. It's just the framework for us to understand how the whole thing has been constructed. Certainly my purpose here is not to create another area of fascination that we get entrained with our mind to forget what we're really supposed to be about, which is removing the mind consciousness construct that we've created all of this and allowed it and bought into it, and return to life, come into our life rather than seeking to go somewhere else and be removed from the prison. We built the prison. We created it. It's built on the internal template being externally projected and manifested, and they just went along with the program. They meaning the elite, you know, the other team. But guess what? Now that the whole thing's breaking down and the end point is not going to deliver to them what they thought, they have to deal with their consequences too. You know, basically we have to all deal with ourselves and our own consequences of what we've allowed and what we've created, because we're not separate from any of it. You know, every starving child in Africa and everything else on this planet, we're part of it. And we have to deal with that fact. You know, because we here in America, besides being, you know, into the New Age fantasies that abound, and we're part of the 144,000 and this and that, and the Star Brothers are going to pick us up and everything else, the fact is we've been living fat and, you know, high on the hog. And those consequences are coming to roost really quickly here.
And not just in the United States. Are you saying this worldwide?
Well, of course, yeah.
A financial meltdown will affect everybody,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that it's coming.
Right. Well, it is and it isn't, because there's a whole new monetary system that is being rebooted right now, or not rebooted, being booted again. And
But it has been done in Europe already, you know, twice. I mean, in my generation or my grandgeneration, it's been done after the World War, and now with the oil. I went through the whole system being rebooted as well.
Mhm.
Was it already setting up a new system in connection with the dollar? Because I remember basically a talk. I attended a public affairs conference, and there was a civil university professor giving us a talk on the euro and how the euro is actually being set up to influence the dollar.
well, yeah.
Fiat.
Yes,
Hmm?
and
It's all fiat, it's all a
Yeah.
national system.
Yeah.
exactly. And I'm, you know, and seeing our similarities a little bit. You know, was there something done prior to this to set it up with the euro? Do you think?
Yeah. Let's not go into that today. We'll talk more about monetary stuff tomorrow. Today we're just building the whole framework, the whole historical, esoteric, symbolic structure. So we will go into more of that tomorrow.